Hello loves, and welcome back to the Siren's Library. Today I wanted to talk about how to get out of a reading slump, because I feel like throughout my life as a reader I have mastered my technique of getting out of a reading slump. Whether you've not read for a few years, or whether you read a really good book that just kind of put you into a reading slump, I'm going to tell you what my technique of getting out of a reading slump. Now, the key to this is to trust the process, because I feel like a lot of people make things a little bit more complicated than they need to be, especially for those who stick to a specific genre. Okay, so my technique to getting out of a reading slump is to, based on what kind of reader I am, I kind of read a little bit of everything. Okay, so I also read in multiple formats. So there's sometimes when I'm reading on my Kindle, there's sometimes when I'm reading listening to an audiobook, there's sometimes when I'm literally just sitting down reading a physical book, right? And so for me, when I'm reading in different formats, if I read a book that was just so good, it was like a 5-star read and I'm still not over it, I'm still thinking about it, all this stuff. If I listen to an audiobook, or I was listening to a book, or physically reading a physical copy of a book that I was just really into and I'm still thinking about, I will kind of switch either the format of my next book, or I will switch the category of what my next book will be in. So if I read something that's historical fiction, I will switch to a fantasy or high fantasy. I will literally completely go left field, and I will just kind of pick a different story, pick a different book. I'm the type of reader that I have a lot of I read a lot of different categories. I read a lot of kids books as well, here and there, because I always said that if I were to have kids, I wanted to have a curated list of recommended books that I can recommend my child. So I always kind of switch it back with what I'm reading. I also would say read some graphic novels, read a comic book, especially if you've been kind of in a slump. Switch the format, switch the genre. Okay, if you're really a romance reader, for example, switch the type of romance that you're reading. So there's there's fantasy romance, there's dark romance, there's more what's it called, the rom-coms type of books. Switch the format in what you're reading. Try other things when it comes to reading. I read a lot of nonfiction, fiction. I love fantasy. My favorite is fantasy books, but I love romance fantasy books as well, or fantasy romance. They're two different things, but they're pretty close. Sometimes if I'm in a reading slump, I will then reread one of my other favorite books from whether it's a series or it's a book, something that's comforting. You know how we have our comfort movies that are just our go-to, or our go-to authors. I would kind of do that to ease my way back into still enjoying reading, but still doing something that it's still it's an enjoyable series, an enjoyable genre for me, but it's a comfort place, but I can still, it'll let me ease back into a different book. If I had read a book that's just really bad, okay, or I'm just oh my god, this is horrible, I'm just I don't even want to read a page anymore, especially if it's a physical book or my Kindle, I will switch to an audio book format immediately. I like to listen to books while I'm cooking and cleaning and doing stuff in my house and stuff. So for me, it's kind of easy to throw myself into a different book when I am out of a physical hand reading experience. So it's easy for me to throw myself into a different story. But it's when the book physically is not great that I'm just I can't, I don't even want to think about these characters, I don't even want to think about this book was horrible or whatever. That's when I really need to go to my comfort read. So the technique is to try different categories, try something new. Think about changing the format that you are reading in, so that way you're not just hung up in that one story, or hung up in the feeling of a slump, because being in a reading slump sucks and it's not pleasant. But for me, I just rip the band-aid and I just throw myself into a new book, and sometimes I find some really good gems, and sometimes I, and it helps me stay motivated when I'm just like, you know what, let's try this. Why not? Like, let's try something new. And then it's a really good way to go through your TBR too, when you are in a reading slump, if you just change the format. And this is great for, working with your library, whether you're reading physical books or whether you are, using Libby and Hoopla app in order to get, your books in a different format. It helps that way as well, because you can also get kids' books on there as well. You can get audiobooks and obviously ebooks and stuff, and you can also place reserve books at the physical library as well. So yeah, those are like my tips and tricks to getting out of a reading slump. It really it takes just, the will to just click a different book or just physically pick up a different type of format. And if you've never tried reading a different category, like just, graphic novels or which are super easy to read. Super easy to read. They're like adult kids books kind of, because you're still getting the picture books, but you're getting, it's more mature themes a lot of the time, but the style is really interesting and stuff. And I'm just like a comic book girl, so I really love reading graphic novels and reading, a lot of comics and stuff like that. So for me, it's really easy to throw myself into a different, genre when I need to just get out of here and go into a separate world. But yeah, you have like your comfort zone books that are just like, you know what, I'm gonna reread you because you're just my safe space. Then you have your, other categories that you can explore and dive into, and then you have your different like formats of reading, which is what I recommend, just switching the format so you don't stay stuck in a slump. A lot of people like to go through their physical TBRs, and that's fine, but sometimes you just need to get the audiobook from your library instead of physically reading it in order to just get out of the previous situation or the slump that you've been in. So yeah, so those are my tips. I hope that y'all enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. I will see y'all in the next one. Have a very blessed day.